Cool. Hello and welcome. I'm Les Bubka, and you're listening to Accidental Podcast or something like that. My today's guest is John Titchen, expert in self-protection, karate, author of many books on pin and flow system, all-around nice person. How are you, John?
I'm very well today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to have you. I'm kind of following your work, and I'm always amazed on your methodical approach. We say in Poland, everything works like in an army. So I know that you are from the army, so it's no surprise there.
RAF.
Sorry, my wife keep telling me off. You are getting upset when I call people army, but it comes from maybe mistranslation in Poland. Armia, which is army.
You mean military?
Military, yeah.
Yeah.
All everything. But I keep doing that mistake, and my apologies. My wife's I'm driving her nuts with that. So army is not the same as RAF and Navy and stuff. Yes. People gonna get upset. So my apologies.
But from my perspective, you see, I only ever worked as a reservist. Not a sort of like a frontline or full time person. But there is a lot of carryover between a lot of the processes that I had to learn in my particular jobs, particularly the tri-service area of what I did, and the safety areas of what I did, and that's had an influence on how I, go about constructing my own training and analyzing things.
We're gonna go talking about it a bit more later, I hope, because that's the thing which is very interesting to me. I was actually writing yesterday reply to the interview with me on an article, and I mentioned you and Chris Wilder because you kind of have a similar approach, very methodical, maybe different backgrounds, but very, very interesting to me, which I'm striving to do, but I'm a bit more chaotic. But let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
And, could you tell us something more about you, your background in martial arts, and where you're coming from?
Right. So I began my real martial arts training in about 1991, and I began in Shotokan karate, and I got the cross training bug very, very early on. In fact, as memory serves, I did my first ever cross training seminar only 9 months into my training. And I went off and I hopped on a train and I went to London and did a weekend course in Stillwell Mantis with a gentleman named Tony Lung, who at the time had a regular column for Combat magazine. And the thing about, a lot of cross training, a lot of the little seminars you go to or videos you watch or books you read, to someone who's full time in that system, they look at these people who flit in and flit out, and I suppose they think, well, this person's only done so much. But from my perspective, what you pick up in a 3-hour seminar, what you pick up in a 5-minute video, that can spark an idea that you take into your own training elsewhere and that you then work on for years and years and years. So, it's sometimes it's not necessarily about quantity, it's the quality of what you can take away and then how you approach it. But I started cross training very, very early on. And also because I was in a military family and going to a boarding school, from a very early stage, I was doing Shotokan with one group at school. And then when it came to the holidays, I wanted to do Shotokan still. So I had to then go and find another Shotokan club. And of course, as you know, every association has their own flavor, their own different ways of doing things, their own kumite sets, their own basics combinations. And I found that, between school and holiday and university and the different places I went, I got a lot of exposure to different things. My biggest single big cross training thing has always been Aikido. And I did Aikido for almost a decade when I was living in Norwich. And I was very, very fortunate to train with some really, really nice people, John Titchen and Alan Prescott. John has sadly passed away from cancer a number of years ago. But he was also an influence because he was an older instructor. And
John, can I stop you for a second? I think my Wi-Fi is playing up because I heard you in a speed of a slug. So I'm going to switch off the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
And,
we can always start again if you wish.
Okay, come on. Yeah, okay, back. Yeah, sometimes in this room my Wi-Fi doesn't work properly, so we'll see how it's gonna go.
Okay. Where did you lose me? Where did you lose me?
I lose you. Definitely didn't hear the Aikido. I heard the beginning of Aikido, but I didn't hear.
So yeah, I did almost a decade cross training in Aikido, with most of my paired training being, doing 4 hours of Aikido a week. With a really, really good group, and then I would go and do kata, in my own time in the same martial arts center, and that particular direction was really because I wanted to look at some of the stand-up grappling and some of the throwing, and it seemed like a good fit to me. And one thing I'm particularly grateful of is that one of my main instructors, John Titchen, he was an older gentleman. He was a big, strong gentleman, but he was an older gentleman, very much into use as little effort as you can to do a job. So, angles and biomechanics. And I was also lucky that particular group, it was a small club. There were only about 8 people training in that club. But it was very much, you hit the mat, you were back up again in seconds, and then you hit the mat and you're back up again. And actually, in workout terms, I very, very rarely experienced a karate class that had the same intensity of workout. For all the bad rep that Aikido sometimes gets, when you're with people that really want to train, you train. And I was also grateful for the fact that particular group had great big week-long summer schools where you got to train with a multitude of different people, which is always good to get to know different shoulders, different arms, different joints. But also some very, very senior instructors. The late Pierre Chassang was there teaching and training in his 80s. And he was an amazing Aikido to work with. But over the years, I've just taken opportunities where I can to train with people, whatever their background, and to watch people and learn from people, and bring that into my own training. And it's changed what I do. There's no doubt about it. And there was a time when I started to wonder whether am I still doing karate anymore?
Yeah,
or not. I've kind of come full circle on that, and I now go, yes, I am doing karate. But it's my karate.
Yeah, that's a funny process, isn't it? I went through that as well, with the addition of wrestling and all the stuff which I've done, and then you kind of lose that confidence that am I doing stuff right? Am I okay? Am I still karate? And then it goes like, yeah, it's my karate. That's meant to be.
Yes,
but a lot of people are in opposition to that, isn't it?
And the thing is, I mean, from your own wrestling background that a lot of the stuff that you might look at as a karateka and go, yes, this is different. But when you actually understand it, you go, well, hang on a second. This thing that I've just done, I've just seen the judo guys do it, or I've just seen the wrestling guys do this thing, which is in Basai Dai, or an exercise in Jite. Oh, that looks like a judo warm-up exercise. And you start to see, hang on a second, it is all there in my karate, but of course it's only really there if you train it. If you know what I mean, it's one thing to say, yes, we have it in karate, or yes, it's in the kata, but you've only really got it if you use it.
Yeah, I find it funny that recently, everybody does the bunkais, the applications, and you look online and people say, "Oh yeah, it was in we done it 20 years ago." Well, nobody was doing that 20 years ago, so how did you not share it?
Yes, yeah. Although, I mean, in defense of some people, obviously, 20 years ago, we didn't have YouTube.
Yeah.
We didn't have, we only just had sort of email groups, didn't we? And forums were starting to become a thing. But it was, it was a lot harder to share media and ideas with other people. So who knows, they may well have been doing it.
Yeah, I stand corrected.
Or then again, they may just be, spinning you a bit of a tale.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, there are some people who, for want of a better word, have chosen to preserve their karate exactly the way it was when they learned it, whether that be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And to a certain extent, their longevity has been doing the same year of training over and over and over again. I've got to a stage now with my own health, having had, so many surgeries and things, that I'm very, very careful about who I cross-train with now. I'll watch a lot more than I'll physically go out and do. But that said, I'm back at a stage where I'm keen for my older students to go out, do the cross training, and then come back to me. And if they've seen something which they feel would be a positive addition to what we could do and would integrate with what we're doing, then it becomes, the teacher learns from the student who learned from another teacher, which I think is actually a very, very traditional way of doing things. You look at the way things were done in the 20th century with people like Funakoshi sending, I think it was Igami, went off to train with Ishiba. And then, other people were sent off back to Okinawa to pick up other things, to preserve them and so forth. And, often, the teacher themselves, the main teacher, doesn't necessarily have the time or the inclination perhaps to go out and do that cross training themselves, but they send their students out to do it and then bring it back in. Now sometimes that may be ego, the teacher doesn't want to be humiliated by going into another class. And that's a shame. If you're healthy enough to do it and you have time to do it, then do it. I mean, otherwise there's nothing wrong from learning from your own students, I think.
Yeah, I think that both ways are good. I personally love being I don't see it as a humiliation, but let's say defeated or put in my place. Oh, that's the word. Put in my place with the new trainings and stuff like that. It just stimulates my growth.
Yes, yes.
Something to work on. Speaking of your health, I know you went through a lot of physical operations and physical health changes, but I'll ask that every person who comes on my podcast. So what impact had or have karate on your mental health?
Well, the reason I'm actually in karate is linked to my mental health. And when I was a teenager, I went through a period of having tremendous aggression and behavior, to the extent that I was suspended from school and I lost almost a year of schooling. And it was suggested to me that martial arts would help me control my anger management and my anger issues. And it just so happened that when I went back to school the next year, a karate club started up at school. And I just threw myself into that. And I am still by nature quite an angry and aggressive person.
Really?
I find my karate helps me keep a lid on that. You know, my training, careful release of aggression at different points. I never fully release my mind, so to speak, in training, but I find for me it's a great way of calming myself and relaxing. So for me, that's been one of the biggest things that has kept me in training, is its positive effect for me on anger management and aggression management.
I would never get, in a million years, I wouldn't guess. He always seems to be so calm and...
Well, I try. I try.
Even to the degree, sometimes I would say calculated, but not in a bad meaning of the word. But yeah, just calm and methodical person. Well, we all got the secrets. So you said, how did you get into karate? You just said it, that
yes,
it was
yes.
the kind of accident.
And I think, like so many people, you know, as instructors, particularly as people who run clubs, you know, we try and recruit students, and we try and put out adverts that, you know, reflect what we do. But perhaps the elephant in the room is often that, you know, people will go for the most convenient thing. And the reason that my core, my foundation is Shotokan, was simply the fact that there was a Shotokan club at the school I went to. You know, if a judo club had started up, we probably would not be talking now. You know, and similarly, you know, if it had been a teacher that had done Chinese martial arts, you know, maybe I'd be a Wing Chunner or something, you know. So it's, I think there is that convenience element. And I've met people who I've asked, oh, you know, how's your son doing with his karate? Oh, he stopped because they stopped running the club in this town. They moved it to somewhere 5 miles away. And I'm there thinking, 5 miles away? And I can remember from my own point of view, you know, I used to train with my own grading instructor when I was at university. I'd be going to university karate classes, and I'd be doing my own training in the mornings at university. But because of the way my timetable was, come Friday, I'd get a train from Birmingham down to Buckinghamshire, and then Saturday morning, I would drive from Buckinghamshire to Bishop Stortford for a 1 hour class with my instructor before driving back to Buckinghamshire, and then on Sunday getting the train up to Birmingham again. And, you know, admittedly, Bishop Stortford, you know, it's only about an hour and a half drive for a 1 hour class. Obviously 3 hours when you know, include the return journey. But then when you start adding in the train journey to Birmingham as well. And so I get absolutely flabbergasted when people say, oh, we stopped because the club moved 5 miles away. Yeah. I can't understand that.
Yeah, I've been flying to Poland to my teachers, so hey ho, you know, you do what you have to do, isn't it? But yeah, I think people look for convenience. It's for some people it's more a hobby than the proper training. And
I don't think we should condemn that, because
no.
You know, as I think you have said, you know, people are in the martial arts for lots of different reasons, or rather they may join with, the reasons for people joining may often be different from the reasons people stay. But whether you're there because you want to be a very successful competitive fighter, whether you're there because you want self-defense, one of the big things that good karate should offer, even if it doesn't really offer those two things, should be improved physical health. And as you know, you, I'm sure, will be the first to point out the good mental health of just being around other people and sharing an activity. You know, even if you're not necessarily going out for a drink with them afterwards, or having much of a social life within the club, often just going out and meeting another group of people and doing an exercise together, it can be very, very good for your mental health, as well as your physical health. And one of the things I've noticed with the lockdown that, you know, so many of us have experienced recently is, you know, a lot of my students are teenagers, and, you know, that's an age where social interaction can be so important. And, you know, they've been kept separate, they've been out of school. And I've now got to the stage where, under our COVID secure procedures, we're running training in my garden. We've been running Zoom classes for weeks and weeks and weeks. And, you know, we've had varied uptake on that. Some people couldn't cope with it. Some people absolutely loved it and were training 5 days a week. But now that I've got groups of teenagers spread out in the garden, and the rules in my local area have changed so that I can have above 6 people in the garden, what it tends to be, particularly at the initial stages, as people come in and, you know, they get the temperature taken and they wash their arms and their hands and their face and their neck before they start training, is people standing around, and the banter levels amongst the teenagers, you know, you can see just the general happiness for being in a space surrounded by other people. And I think that's something we often forget, particularly people like, you know, me, who, you know, focus on self-protection predominantly, is that, you know, for a lot of people, it's not about that. Or even if it was when they started, it's no longer a concern. They're there because they enjoy the company of other people, and they enjoy the exercise and the physical and mental benefits that brings.
Yeah, sure. Well, I can see on my son as well. He's only 3.5, and he's going a bit of not really weirdo, but he's constantly asking about his friends, when he can go back to school, to nursery. So he was last week they went 2 weeks ago. Sorry, I went first time to the nursery, and I never seen him so happy running to the nursery. You know, I'm going to be with my friends. I'm going to be with teachers. I'm going to be doing stuff. So
yes,
you can see from the little ones to the grown-ups that it is impacting mental health. You mentioned that you're doing the more self-protection training. So what's your approach to self-protection through karate?
I mean, self-protection has been my main focus for over the last 20 years. But there's that little clash, because, of course, the majority of self-protection isn't really physical. You know, it's mental, and it's not about the actual conflict situation. It's about avoiding the situation. It's about body language and behavior in a way that deters other people from attacking it, and so forth. But of course, when people come to a class, they don't generally go to a class to want to sit down to have the instructor talk to them.
Yeah.
You know, they go to a class for physical training. And so the way I end up modeling that is, yes, we do, you know, in class, it's the physical training, and the physical stuff is legally underpinned force scalable drills related to habitual acts of violence. But what I do is, in the syllabus document, which everyone is made to read as part of the examination processes, because I have theory exams for every single grade in addition to the physical exams. So they have to look up stuff to answer questions. And that's the way I make sure that people are reading the syllabus and being forced to read some safety advice. We have that element of the syllabus. So a large part of the self-protection element of the syllabus is written. And then when we do sim days, which are a grading requirement for my guys for their brown belts upwards from 3Q upwards, those are self-protection days. A lot of people tend to focus, they see the pictures or they see a bit of video and they see people in body armor doing role play and that sort of stuff. But what they don't tend to see, of course, is that, yes, I'll have given people individual briefings and then send them in. And often people won't know who's doing what. So it can be quite unpredictable for them, and they have to make decisions. But after we've run, say, 3 or 4 scenarios in a particular environment, everyone goes back to the briefing room the videos go up and we freeze frame and we look at the combative side of what happened and discuss what went on there. But then we start talking about legal considerations, ethical considerations. Did you have to get involved? Should you have got involved? And that's why they are really self-protection training days, more than anything else, because we're talking through, could this have been avoided? Could it be handled better? What are the repercussions for you? What are the repercussions for the other person for your involvement? The idea is really to get people to think about their red lines and to think about the consequences of their actions ahead of any event rather than after any event.
Sure. I know that based of that your self-defense approach or self-protection approach, you created DART. Could you explain what DART is, how the concept was born, and what it means?
Well, this comes back to something I mentioned earlier, which was I got to a stage where what I was doing had changed so much that I couldn't call it Shotokan anymore. And I was using the generic term practical karate. And then I got to a stage where I was starting to really question whether what I was doing was karate. And, for descriptive purposes, for marketing purposes, I needed to call it something. And I personally, I didn't want to name it after myself. I'm not that egotistical. And I didn't want to use a Japanese name because I'm not Japanese. And I wanted something that summed up what we did. So DART is defense, attack, and resolution tactics. It also refers to the weapon. And also it crucially refers to a swift movement. And it's really, when I look at it now, how I describe DART now, I would say, yes, this is karate. And I refer to it as DART karate. But for me, it was really just wanting to find a way of describing what I was doing in English rather than using a Japanese term for what is, essentially English or British karate. And in terms of what we do physically, sorry about that. In terms of what we do physically, there's a lot of commonality between what I do and what you'll see in a lot of reality-based self-defense systems. But at the same time, I teach kata, and I had a number of years where I wasn't teaching kata in DART, and then I got to a stage where I wasn't happy with my students' footwork. I wasn't happy with their stances, and then one or two people got some injuries that knocked them out from training, and I thought, well, they need something that they can practice when they're not at training. And so we've now moved essentially to a stage where we have 4 kata that I teach in DART, 2 of which are traditional karate kata, the Teki Naihanchi kata, and the Seisan Hangetsu kata. The 2 kata have been chosen for slightly different reasons, but they are very, very common across a wealth of karate styles. And then we have 2 kata which are mine and based on my drills, with me wanting really to give the students something that they could practice that would work the majority of their combinations, but also include some ability and agility exercises and some principle-based stuff. Now, I could perhaps have said, well, I'll get them to do the Heian kata instead. But as much as I like the Heian kata, I don't like the embassy of the Heian kata. I don't like the requirement for space. I wanted a kata where you could start it and you could finish it, and you didn't have to shuffle forward or back or change your position. And you could do it in a narrow corridor, small space in a kitchen, push a chair aside and do it in a hotel room. I wanted the embassy to be that tight while including all the combinations that I wanted people to rehearse. And so that's how those two kata came about. And it was really just a process of me writing down what I wanted to include and then having to sit down and figure out an order of doing it so that it hit all the bases and kept an embusson that worked in that small space. And you know, that is how those kata were born.
Are they based on your Pinan flow or Heian flow system? What's that all about?
Well, that's kind of a Ouroboros thing, because the Heian flow system was me taking my applications in and putting them together in a manner to try and teach people how to move from static to dynamic to alive training. I think it's one of the things that we do the worst within the martial arts, because often it's as if you're jumping off a cliff going from static training to suddenly free sparring and dynamic training. And so the flow in both of those, Heian flow system and Pinan flow system, doesn't refer to flow drills. I mean, yes, what they're doing is drills, but when people talk about flow drills, I generally associate that with a fixed pattern of movement that is usually circular and comes back to a point, and may even have one person doing one thing and then another person does the same thing back at them. Whereas the flow in the Pinan flow system was really about the concept of freely flowing between grappling and striking, and freely flowing between combinations. The whole thing was designed to work like modern Lego or Meccano, in that you had lots and lots of different combinations, but then you were taught how this combination could feed into that, with various different options. And I think a lot of people who looked at my stuff initially but didn't necessarily read the stuff at the front or the end of the drills thought, oh, it relies on this person doing this, 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 and this. But actually, in both the Heian flow system and the Pinan flow system, it was always designed that you might teach a particular combination, but then you turn over the page in the next drill, the person does something different and you flow to something different. And it was always designed so that there'd be very, very few set sequences. But when you teach it, you might say, I want you to start with a punch, go to a clinch, and do this. But that's just a stage, because you might teach people punching drills, you teach people clinching drills, you teach people tackle drills, you teach people headlock drills. And you might do those individually. Then you might say, punch to tackle, punch to clinch, punch to headlock. And then you say to the guy, right, punch to whichever one of those you want. The other person's just got to, learn, respond to the stimuli now. And then you start adding in, okay, this time, instead of hitting them, I want you to wrap them up with something. And, so that's how we're teaching people to do it. And a lot of the time in my own clubs, I'll say, start with this. And at different stages, different age grades, I may give them a fixed dynamic combination to do, or I may just say, start the punch, see where you go. That's how it's designed. Now, the difference between the Heian flow system and the Pinan flow system is really just 10 years of training. It's me changing what I did, incorporation, more clinch and boxers hug and stand-up grappling work, because we were seeing so much more of that coming about in scenario training when we were doing real force-on-force work. How does that relate to Dart? Well, Dart kind of came out of the Heian flow system, and then a lot of stuff that I felt was unnecessary got stripped away, and then stuff got pressure tested and changed a little bit. And then from Dart, what I essentially did was take Dart and then adapt it to the Shotokan kata to make the Pinan flow system. But having said that, the Pinan flow system, what I teach to Shotokan people, I've got a very, very small number of Shotokan students. I obviously teach more Shotokan people in seminars than I actually have Shotokan students. Shotokan only represents 10% of my student base. but I've lost my thread of where I'm talking now. The the thing is, the P&M flow system was written 2013, 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And, I now do combinations in that and transitions in that I didn't show in the books. And some of the ones I did show in the books, I don't do so often anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the ones that were in the books actually were there really that there were one or two things that I didn't do, but I thought would be useful for people who still did one-step kumite
Mm-hmm.
as a helpful introduction. And similarly, my Dart syllabus, it changes every year. Things get trialed, things get stripped down, things get put in, broken apart, because everything has to fit together holistically.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big concentrations in recent years has been improving our ground game in Dart. It's not where we want to be, but we want to be competent on it. And my existing ground drills had served me very, very well in training and just free playing with various different people. And I'd had the opportunity to try them out on some ground specialists in judo, and they'd worked very, very well there in light-hearted playing. But at the same time, I recognised, there's scope for improvement, and actually, it's something my students really enjoy doing. So, we've been bringing more catch wrestling into the Dart game, and incorporating that into what we're doing with the ground stuff. But it's all a constant process of change. When I get round to doing a P&M flow system video series at some point in time, it will be different to the books. In fact, the P&M flow system as I currently teach it is probably different enough from the books now for me to do a new set of books, but I'd rather do videos first.
I think that's the only way. My syllabus is changing as well all the time, because where you go and learn or think about what you want to teach, you're always evolving. So your training needs to reflect that, and student needs to be aware what they're doing. So yes. I appreciate that. The other thing you mentioned, that your students love groundwork. I found that because most of my students are people who done karate before in UK and joined me. And when I introduce them to I call it cuddling, they are surprised how actually fun it is to do.
Yes.
We not do super extended groundwork just to, don't be catching there and get up. But you can't find something which you're not aware of what's happening there. You get confused, and then there's no chance you survive. So it's nice to see that more people from the karate background is starting being interested in the limited groundwork, but it's at least something happening, isn't it?
Definitely.
So tell me how you structure your methodology of teaching. Are you more for the traditional, which I don't think so you are, but more traditional ways, or you searching for newest methods? You picking from the sports side of stuff?
I think there's a lot to be learned from other disciplines, and not necessarily just sporting disciplines, because the thing is, there is just a wealth of information out there. We're in a very information-rich age, and if you want to see something pressure tested, then, for some things, you might talk to law enforcement, even though, I think most of my law enforcement friends would agree. The law enforcement officers that actually do grappling very, very well are the law enforcement officers that actually do martial arts. Because, sadly, in the scope of training, pretty much wherever you look in the world, it's a lower down priority for everything else that the law enforcement community have to deal with. But then, that's one side of things. There's also all the mixed martial arts is an ideal place where you can look at 101 things that are in kata being applied in a different context, and learn from that. In terms of stretching and flexibility, and you look at what the professional athletes are doing, what the gymnasts are doing, what the dancers are doing, what the ballet people are doing. There are some people that still do warm-ups that they're 20, 30 years out of date, at least, in their approaches. And in teaching, the way we teach, there's always more to learn. And a lot of what I do, some stuff, it's influenced from the fact, I've been a first aid instructor for years and years and years, and you do learn a lot from that about sometimes the importance of keeping things very, very simple for what you may need to remember under a highly pressurized situation, having a particular way of teaching things. And the same with, the military way of teaching things and drilling things, in terms of how you build up from, learning a weapon system, learning to fire it on a range, doing various forms of blank firing training, to move from fire and movement drills with pairs to fire teams to working as platoons, and a whole different scale up in the way people train and way people do things. And there's a lot of information out there that I think we should be taking more advantage of. We live at a time where we have access to this, and no matter how much we might want to put past masters on pedestals, they were human. They were doing the best they could with what they knew and what they had access to. And actually, we all have access to so much more than they did. So, we should use that.
Yeah, it is. You just need to reach out and have the will to implement it. I find that people learn something and sit comfortably on it, and it goes out of date, and they don't search the improvement. What are your future plans? I know you're working on a really nice book because you keep posting bits of it.
Yeah. The new book is getting close to release. It's going to be released on the 1st of September. The ebook side of it is done. Actually, it's the ebook I'm the most happy with. You yourself know from doing book editing, etc. Things keep changing in this world, and what was the standard for putting images into an ebook a few years ago is different now. And the quality of image you can render is different. And the same with print on demand paperback books. And I've got this book, and as it stands, I'm very, very happy with it. But I've actually decided I'm going to add 8 pages in it, because I've decided that there are a couple of things where I've done small images that I've used in the past, and I've gone, that could be a full-size image. I can add 8 pages onto this book. I'm going to make these images bigger. Why not? But that will be out 1st of September. The next project for me will probably be a video project. When that's going to be ready, I don't know. There is a book in the works, which has been in the works for about 20 years, on self-protection, and the structure of the book is written, and a lot of the content of the book is kind of up here. I always plan my writing, and I plan things. I tend to have open emails where I just pop things in. So if an idea comes, go, I don't want to forget this, and I'll pop it in to make sure I don't forget it. That may be a standalone project, or maybe a collaborative project. There's someone I'm talking to about that who I think could bring an interesting angle to it, but we've yet to sort out what we want to do. I would like to release a second volume of Karate and Self-Defense selected articles. I believe I've got enough articles that would be of interest there for a second volume. So in writing terms, there's still stuff on the horizon. For me, obviously, I don't know where I'm going in teaching terms. And that's simply because, yes, at the moment I'm teaching Zoom every week, and I'm teaching 3 physical contact sessions every single week under the COVID secure guidelines that I've set out for my association. And I have one particular training partner that I work with that, I'm kind of in a fixed partnership for training with. I'm not sure how his fiance feels about that, but I'm working contact with one person, and it looks like we will scale up what we're doing in September, because at the moment we're working in fixed pairs, but come September most of my students are going to be in year group bubbles during the school day, and then they're going to be breaking out of their bubbles to mingle in buses at the end of school. But there's a difference between me teaching my own students who come from a limited geographical area and for whom I can put in place training procedures. I can get them to take their temperatures every day. I can, have them sign forms saying they're not coming training if they've got any particular symptoms within the household in the last 2 weeks. I can track and trace them if anything, anyone gets COVID-19 type symptoms. But for me to do a seminar where people are coming from all over the place, that's a bit of a different matter. And, for me, I'm a transplant patient. I take immunosuppressants morning and night. I am classed as highly vulnerable. And so I don't know when I'm going to be teaching seminars again. It really will depend on whether there's an effective vaccine or not, or what the case rate comes down to being. I've only booked in 1 seminar for next year, and I don't even know at this stage whether that's going to go ahead. I'm not even planning any foreign seminars at the moment, so I don't know whether I may end up retiring as a seminar instructor in the future or not. It really comes down to what the state of play is with this virus, simply because I'm in that higher risk category.
Yeah, sure. It is challenging times. It is challenging times. I think nobody knows what's gonna happen. Let's hope that we all gonna go back to normal, and the vaccine gonna be successful, and you can be saved.
Well, I hope so. I think there's a lot of karateka that are absolutely itching to get out and get training in seminars in addition to in their own clubs. Probably a lot of karate widows or karate widowers who are hoping that their husband and wife gets out to train fairly soon. So, I think it's one thing that everyone, right across the world is hoping that something effective will be available soon. It's obviously very, very encouraging that a number of already manufactured and already cheap medications seem to be having a positive effect on the treatment of those who've been unfortunate enough to catch it and get severe symptoms, which will hopefully bring the death rate down for those that do catch it and suffer more severe symptoms in the future. We can only hope. We can just trust to the people with the big brains and the equipment and the budgets, and also hope that there are a lot of people prepared to be the volunteers for vaccines, because without volunteers, these things don't happen. When I had my first transplant, I actually trialed a new form of treatment, and I was just asked probably about an hour before surgery, would you be happy to try this? It's higher risk. You might lose the kidney sooner. And my thought process was, I will try it, because yes, it may be higher risk, but if we don't try it, we won't know if it's better. And if it's better, it could improve things for lots of people. And from my perspective, any transplant is better than no transplant when you're on dialysis. Did
that work? It is better.
My first transplant lasted for 6 years, and it worked. It worked very, very well for a number of years, and then, very, very rapid decline. I had another period on dialysis, and my current transplant I've now had for 15 years, and that's currently working incredibly well.
Oh, that's good to hear. And how your recovery going from the last operation? Are you fully back or still straining yourself?
I think in terms of physical recovery, it's been good. We're still not 100% certain as to whether it's worked. I've got to have a few more tests done. I may have to have another procedure done because the fault may be elsewhere, actually in my throat rather than in my esophagus. But we have a plan in place for that, although treatment for that has been pushed back because the health service has been, obviously, a lot of it's been shut down to deal with the COVID-19 outbreak, or being running at reduced numbers of procedures. In terms of my own injury status, I had a number of different accidents during my recovery. I think I might have broken my foot, but by the time I got it x-rayed 4 weeks later, they couldn't tell, and they just said there's definite tendon inflammation, and that has healed up. And I've currently got a very, very inflamed tendon on my my right fifth metacarpal, which is due to a speedball just catching it at precisely the wrong angle, and that has proved a little bit annoying because I keep losing my little finger. I keep doing things, and my little finger gets stuck. Extended, and I can't move it, and I have to physically bring my hand into a fist to rotate the tendon just slightly over the knuckle, and then I can get my hand back. But when it first happened, I couldn't do that, and I'd get this finger that was stuck, and I had to use my other hand to close my fist to do it. So lesson learned: more padding on gloves.
Yeah, my student, you see people doing all this dangerous stuff outside of karate. Karate is safe. My student went with a dog, and dog pulled him, and he felt a snap or something, and his finger is fused like that now, and nobody in NHS knows what to do with it. He's now a year with a finger like that, cannot open it. We tried forcefully. What they reckon is that he torn the ligament, and the tendon, and it's fused together, and he cannot open it, so they have to slash it. But because of COVID, he's waiting. His next appointment is on the end of October.
Right.
I hope.
I've got to admit, my worst knee injuries have come from the dog, not from karate. It's where the dog has pulled suddenly when you've been in a position on your heel, or you've had all your weight on one foot, and that's forced a rotation that you weren't expecting. Never underestimate the power of dogs to injure you.
Okay, John. Thank you very much for your insight to the Dart and the pin and flow system.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me today. It's been a pleasure.
It was a pleasure for me as well.